hospital ship, Hope's Light, floated in deep space, its white hull shining against the darkness. It was a ship of peace, not war. Inside, doctors and nurses moved quickly, tending to wounded soldiers and civilians. The war between Earth and the HFY Dominion had already lasted 5 years, and this ship was a symbol of hope. Commander Raylan Carter stood on the bridge, watching the stars through the glass viewport. He was a man who had seen too much war, but here, on this ship, he felt at peace. Hope's Light carried no weapons. It was protected by international space law. Even enemies respected a ship that saved lives. Or so they thought. A soft beeping broke the silence. Lieutenant Sarah Vance, the communications officer, frowned at her screen. "Sir, I'm picking up an unidentified fleet," she said, her voice tense. Raylan turned to look at her. "Are they broadcasting an ID?" She shook her head. "No, they're running silent." A cold feeling spread in Raylan's chest. No ID. No communication. That wasn't normal. "Put it on the main screen," he ordered. The large holoscreen flickered to life, showing a cluster of ships moving through space. They were large, dark, and unfamiliar. The fleet was coming straight toward them. Raylan stepped forward. "Open a channel." Vance pressed a button. "This is the medical vessel Hope's Light. We are unarmed and neutral. Identify yourselves." Silence. She tried again. "Unidentified fleet, please respond. We are a hospital ship. We have injured civilians on board." Nothing. Then, without warning, the first missile launched. "Incoming," someone yelled. A second later, the explosion rocked the ship. The floor shook, metal groaned, and alarms screamed. Sparks flew from the control panels. "We've been hit," Vance shouted. "Damage to the lower decks." Raylan grabbed the console. "Send a distress call to Earth. Now." But before they could, another missile struck. This one was worse. Flames burst through the hallways, tearing through the ship. People screamed. Doctors, nurses, patients, all thrown to the ground. On the bridge, the screens flickered. Smoke filled the air. "Comms are down." Vance coughed. "We can't send a message." Raylan clenched his fists. What kind of monsters attack a hospital ship? Then, the enemy fleet came into full view. The HFY Dominion. Their ships were black and sharp, like blades in the dark. Red lights pulsed along their hulls. They weren't here to communicate. They were here to destroy. "Sir, they're charging weapons," Vance shouted. Raylan's mind raced. There was no way to fight back. No way to run. He turned to his crew, his voice calm but firm. "Prepare the escape pods. Get as many people off this ship as possible." "But sir..." "That's an order." The ship's emergency sirens blared. Crew members ran through the corridors, helping the wounded into escape pods. But there weren't enough. There was never enough. Outside, the HFY ships fired again. Laser blasts ripped through Hope's Light, cutting it apart piece by piece. The medical bay was the first to go. Patients, doctors, and nurses, all gone in an instant. Raylan's heart pounded. He had seen death before, but this was a massacre. A massive shockwave hit the bridge. The lights flickered and died. Raylan hit the floor, his head slamming against metal. When he opened his eyes, flames were everywhere. The bridge was breaking apart. Vance was trying to say something, but he couldn't hear her. Then, in the distance, through the cracked glass viewport, he saw the final blow. A massive energy cannon on the enemy's flagship began to glow. Raylan knew what was coming. He took one last breath and closed his eyes. The cannon fired. The explosion was blinding. The hospital ship was gone. Nothing remained but debris, floating in the cold darkness of space. Meanwhile, on Earth, inside the United Earth Defense Fleet, UEDF, headquarters, a young officer ran into the command center, his face pale. "Sir, we just lost contact with Hope's Light." Admiral James Kane turned from his war table, his expression dark. What happened? The officer swallowed hard. Sir, it's gone. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a transmission came through. It was from the HFY Dominion. Admiral Kane played the message. A deep alien voice filled the room. Earth, your time is over. This was only the beginning. Silence. Kane's hands tightened into fists. He turned to his officers, his voice like steel. Activate the war fleet. A younger officer hesitated. Sir, what are our orders? Kane's eyes burned with cold fury. No mercy. Raylan Carter's body floated in the freezing void of space, surrounded by the shattered remains of Hope's Light. The explosion had torn the hospital ship apart, leaving only burning wreckage drifting through the darkness. His mind was foggy, his breaths shallow. He barely felt the jagged edges of metal cutting into his arm. Was this death? Then, a faint beeping. His suit's emergency systems were still online. Oxygen was running low, but a weak distress signal was being sent. He forced his eyes open. His visor was cracked, but through it, he saw something that sent a jolt of energy through his exhausted body. A single escape pod drifting nearby. Summoning every ounce of strength, Raylan reached out. His fingers grazed the cold metal. He tried again, pushing off a piece of floating debris, launching himself toward the pod. His hand hit the emergency latch. With a final desperate pull, the hatch opened, and he collapsed inside, gasping for breath as the automatic systems sealed the door. Pain surged through his body, but he forced himself upright. The communication console flickered. He had to warn Earth. The hospital ship had been obliterated, but if the UEDF didn't know what happened, more lives would be lost. He activated the emergency channel. This is Commander Raylan Carter. Hope's Light has been destroyed. Repeat, Hope's Light has been. Static. Then, through the crackling interference, a voice. Commander Carter, this is UEDF Command. Stay online. We're tracking you. Relief flooded him. He was still alive, and that meant there was still a chance for revenge. On Earth, UEDF headquarters. Admiral James Kane stood at the center of the war room, his jaw clenched as the images of Hope's Light's wreckage filled the holographic screen. The video feed from Raylan's escape pod confirmed what they feared. That HFY Dominion had crossed the line. A hospital ship, destroyed. Hundreds of innocent lives, wiped out. There was no excuse, no justification. This was war. Kane turned to his officers, his voice cold as steel. We launched the fleet. No hesitation. No negotiations. The officers saluted. Across the vast military complex, alarms blared as the war fleet was mobilized. Massive battlecruisers powered up their engines, and sleek fighter squadrons prepared for launch. Earth's greatest weapon, the Titan-class dreadnought Sovereign, activated its primary cannons. There would be no more diplomacy. This was retaliation, deep in HFY territory. Inside the towering command station of the HFY Dominion, Supreme Commander Vorthis stood before a massive screen, watching the destruction his fleet had unleashed. His black exoskeleton gleamed under the dim red lights. His species had always viewed humanity as a threat, and threats had to be eliminated. A lower-ranking officer approached, bowing his head. The Earth fleet has mobilized. They will retaliate. Vorthis let out a guttural chuckle. Of course they will. They are predictable, arrogant. His clawed fingers tapped against the control panel. And we are ready for them. The HFY fleet had been waiting for this moment. Earth thought it was attacking in revenge, but in truth, they were walking into a trap. Raylan's return to Earth. The escape pod entered Earth's atmosphere, burning through the sky before crashing into the ocean. UEDF rescue teams were already waiting. Within minutes, they pulled Raylan from the wreckage, rushing him to the military base. Doctors surrounded him, treating his wounds, but he had no time for rest. He pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain. "I need to see Kane," he said. Minutes later, he stood face to face with the Admiral. "Commander," Kane said, "you're lucky to be alive." Raylan's hands clenched into fists. "I shouldn't be. None of us should be. But I'm here, and I'm ready to fight." Kane nodded. "Then suit up. We're taking the fight to them." Raylan's heart pounded. He had spent years trying to save lives. Now he would end those who had stolen so many. War had come, and Earth would not hold back. The war drums of Earth had begun to beat. Across the solar system, fleets were mobilizing, weapons were primed, and soldiers braced for battle. The United Earth Defense Fleet, UEDF, was no longer on the defensive. It was out for vengeance. The attack on Hope's Light had sealed the fate of the Iraq Dominion. Raylan Carter had barely recovered from his injuries when he was thrust into the heart of the war effort. His body ached, his mind swirled with rage, but he had no time to dwell on the pain. He now stood on the command deck of the UEDF Sovereign, Earth's most powerful warship, staring at the holographic battle plans with Admiral Kane and the top-ranking officers. Intel confirms that the Iraq have stationed their primary battle fleet near the Caldor Nebula, Kane said, his voice cold and measured. "They expect us to attack their homeworld directly. We won't." A murmur spread through the room. A frontal assault had been the obvious move, but Kane had something else in mind. He pointed to the holographic display, where the Iraq fleet's position was marked in red. "They think they have the upper hand," Kane continued. "They've set up a trap, expecting us to walk into it, but we're going to turn it against them." Raylan's eyes narrowed. "How?" Kane's lips curled into a smirk. "By making them believe we're predictable." Inside the Iraq War Council chamber, the air in the chamber was thick with the scent of burning incense. Right. Generals, their exoskeletons gleaming under the dim red light, stood around a massive tactical display. Supreme Commander Vorthis watched the blinking indicators that represented Earth's war fleet. "The humans are moving exactly as we anticipated," one of the generals rasped. "They seek revenge. They will attack with full force." Vorthis chuckled darkly, his mandibles clicking in amusement. "Of course they will. That is their nature. They act on emotion, not strategy." A hologram flickered to life before him, displaying a high-ranking intelligence officer. "Supreme Commander, our long-range sensors have detected the Sovereign leading the assault. The humans will be within our trap zone in less than 30 hours. Vorthis tapped his clawed fingers together. "Excellent. They will not survive to see another sunrise." The Iraq fleet was prepared. Thousands of warships stood ready. Their energy cannons, capable of piercing through planetary shields, had already been positioned within the nebula. The humans would never leave alive. Or so they thought. The battle plan. On board the Sovereign, final preparations were being made. Every pilot, soldier, and engineer knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a war, it was retribution. Raylan, now suited in his advanced battle armor, stood inside the strike team's war room, surrounded by elite operatives. They were the first wave. The spear that would break the enemy's deception. Kane's voice echoed through the intercom. "The Iraq believe we'll charge into their fleet head-on. And that's exactly what we're going to make them believe." But in reality, Kane's smirk was almost audible. "We'll be going around them." A new holographic projection emerged, displaying a hidden hyperspace corridor, a route barely detectable by conventional scanners. It led directly behind the Iraq fleet. Raylan's eyes widened. "You're going to flank them." "Not just flank them," Kane corrected. "Crush them." The plan was simple, but brilliant. The main UEDF fleet would charge directly toward the Iraq armada, drawing their attention. But in the background, a covert strike force, including the Sovereign and its elite battle groups, would slip through the hidden corridor and emerge behind enemy lines. Once in position, the real assault would begin. The Iraq would be surrounded, outmaneuvered, destroyed. Raylan exhaled. This was it. A call rang through the command deck. "Admiral, the fleet is ready." Kane turned toward the massive panoramic window, where thousands of Earth's warships hovered in the depths of space, engines glowing like a sea of stars. With a single command, he gave the order. "All forces, attack." The fleet advances. Earth's warships ignited their thrusters, surging forward like an unstoppable tide. The battle had begun. At the same time, Raylan and his strike force launched from the Sovereign, their fighters slipping into the hidden hyperspace corridor. The plan was in motion. The fate of humanity and its Tyrrak dominion hung in the balance. The war had begun. In the vast darkness of space, thousands of Earth's warships surged forward, their engines burning like stars in the void. The United Earth Defense Fleet, UEDF, had committed everything to this battle. It wasn't just about strategy or territory. It was vengeance. As the fleet closed in on the Kaldor Nebula, where the Tyrrak forces lay in wait, Admiral Kane stood on the command deck of the UEDF Sovereign, watching the battlefield unfold in real time on the holographic display. Every second counted. Every move was critical. But there was one problem. Something was wrong. "Their fleet isn't reacting," one of the officers muttered, staring at the tactical display. The Tyrrak armada remained motionless, positioned exactly where they had been before the attack order was given. No counter-maneuvers, no defensive formations, nothing. "They knew we were coming," Kane said, his voice cold and calculating. "They're waiting for something." Raylan Carter, standing near the command station, felt a chill run down his spine. A trap. Without a doubt. The realization came a second too late. In coning, a pulse of energy ripped through space, a sudden explosion of gravitational force that disrupted the fleet's systems. Alarms blared as UEDF ships were violently thrown off course, their navigation scrambling to compensate. The Tyrrak had activated a gravity well generator, creating an artificial singularity in the middle of the battlefield. The fleet was being dragged straight into the enemy's firing zone. Kane clenched his jaw. "They want us immobilized so they can pick us off one by one." But Earth's fleet wasn't so easily broken. Countermeasures. Fire stabilizing thrusters. Shift formation Alpha 2. Kane barked. The massive warships engaged emergency protocols, activating secondary thrusters to fight against the pull of the gravitational field. It was a desperate maneuver, but it worked. The fleet slowed down just enough to regain control. And then, the Tyrrak finally moved. Their warships opened fire all at once, unleashing a storm of energy blasts, plasma cannons, and kinetic warheads. The battle had truly begun. Raylan turned to Kane. "We need to launch the strike team. If we don't take out that gravity well, we're sitting ducks." Kane nodded. "Go." Within minutes, Raylan's strike team deployed, their stealth fighters slipping past the main battle as the larger warships clashed in a chaotic dance of destruction. Their mission was clear: disable the gravity well generator at all costs. Inside the Tyrrak War Command Chamber, Supreme Commander Vorthis watched the battle unfold with a sense of satisfaction. The humans were resilient, but they were predictable. They had fallen right into his trap. "They fight harder than expected," one of his officers admitted. "But they are losing," Vorthis replied calmly. "Their destruction is only a matter of time." But just as he said that, something caught his eye. A small covered squadron of Earth ships breaking away from the main battle. They were moving fast, slipping through the chaos, heading straight for. His mandibles clicked in frustration. They spotted the generator. Vorthis slammed his fist against the control panel. The humans were more cunning than he had given them credit for. If they destroyed the gravity well, the battle would shift in their favor. He turned to his second-in-command. "Send the Dreadwings. Wipe them out." Raylan's fighter sliced through space, dodging enemy fire as he led his squad toward the Tyrrak gravity well generator, a massive station-like structure anchored near the edge of the battlefield. It was heavily guarded. "We've got company," one of his squadmates warned. From the darkness of space, the Dreadwings emerge, Sirac's elite fighter squadron. Sleek, black, and almost invisible against the backdrop of space, these ships were designed for one thing: hunting. And they were locked onto Raylan's team. "We don't have time for this," Raylan muttered, gripping his controls. The battle turned into a frantic chase. Earth's strike team weaved through debris and laser fire, trying to stay on course. Every second wasted in dogfights was a second the fleet remained vulnerable. Raylan made a quick decision. "Split up. We'll regroup at the target." His fighter dove sharply, breaking formation. The Xirac pursuers hesitated for a split second, unsure which ship to chase. That was all the time Raylan's team needed. They zigzagged through the battlefield, forcing the Dreadwings to scatter. One of Raylan's squadmates managed to slip past the chaos and reach the generator station first. A precise missile strike hit its outer defenses, exposing the weak points. Raylan saw the opening. This is it. He locked onto the generator's core, his ship's targeting systems beeping rapidly. He took a deep breath. One shot, one chance. He fired. The missile streaked through space and slammed into the exposed core. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, boom. The generator erupted in a massive explosion, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The artificial gravitational field collapsed instantly, and Earth's fleet was freed from its deadly pull. Cheers erupted in the UEDF command deck. Kane smirked. "Nice work, Carter." But the battle wasn't over yet. With the gravity trap gone, the full force of Earth's fleet could now move freely. And now, it was Earth's turn to strike back. The explosion of the gravity well generator was like a beacon in the chaos of battle. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The Xirac fleet hesitated, their advantage suddenly ripped away. Then came the counterattack. "All ships, advance." Admiral Kane's voice boomed across the fleet's communication channels. The UEDF warships surged forward, weapons blazing, no longer trapped in the enemy's web. Earth's forces had been wounded, but now, they were about to return the favor. Raylan Carter, still gripping the controls of his fighter, took a sharp breath as he pulled up from the explosion. "That was too close," he muttered. His squadmates regrouped, their ships weaving between debris and stray enemy fire. "You did it, Carter," one of the pilots, Lieutenant Hall, chimed in. "Gravity wells down, and now the big guns are moving in." But Raylan wasn't celebrating yet. His eyes scanned the battlefield. Something wasn't right. The Xirac fleet should have been in full retreat. Instead, they were repositioning. "Hall, do you see this?" Raylan asked. There was a pause before Hall responded. "Yeah, they're not breaking formation. They're regrouping," Raylan finished. His stomach twisted. This wasn't just desperation. The Xirac were planning something else. On the Xirac command bridge, Supreme Commander Vorthis seethed in anger. The humans had outmaneuvered him. He had underestimated them. But he wasn't done yet. "They think they've won," Vorthis growled. His mandibles twitched as he turned toward his chief strategist. "Deploy Project Harbinger." The officer hesitated. "Sir, that weapon is not fully operational." Vorthis' eyes burned with rage. "It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to destroy them." The order was given. Across the Xirac fleet, a massive warship, twice the size of any UEDF battleship, began to emerge from the shadows of a nearby dead moon. Its hull was covered in organic plating, pulsating with an eerie, unnatural glow. Unlike the other ships in the Xirac fleet, this one looked alive. The UEDF sensors picked up the new energy reading instantly. "Admiral Kane," a tactical officer shouted, "we've got a problem." Kane turned to the display, his eyes narrowing at the unknown vessel moving toward the battlefield. "What am I looking at?" "Unknown Xirac ship, sir. It's massive, and its energy levels are spiking, way beyond anything we've ever seen from them. A heavy silence fell over the bridge. Then, the first energy blast fired. The beam of light wasn't just a weapon, it was devastation itself. The Harbinger-class dreadnought unleashed a titanic pulse of energy, cutting through space like a blade of pure destruction. One of Earth's heavy cruisers, UED of Valor, took the hit directly. There was no explosion, no wreckage, no warning. The ship simply ceased to exist. 1 second it was there, firing, moving, part of the fight. Then the next, it was gone, erased from reality. The entire UEF fleet went silent. What kind of weapon was that? Kane's hands clenched into fists. That HFY had just changed the rules of war. Raylan, still in his fighter, saw it happen from afar. His blood ran cold. "This just got a hell of a lot worse," Hall whispered over the comms. Raylan didn't answer. His mind was racing. If that thing could fire again, the fleet wouldn't survive. On that Tyrak bridge, Vorthis watched with satisfaction. "The humans fear it," he murmured. "They should." But then, something unexpected happened. The human fleet didn't retreat. Even after witnessing the destruction of one of their own, they did not run. Instead, they pressed forward. Admiral Kane's voice rang out over the fleet-wide comms. "We don't run. We don't surrender. That thing is strong, but it's not invincible. Find its weakness. Hit it with everything we have. We end this." The UED of warships adjusted formation, preparing for an all-out attack. Raylan, staring at the massive HFY dreadnought, exhaled slowly. "If we don't stop that thing now, Earth is next." And so, with everything on the line, the final phase of the battle began. The battlefield was a graveyard of burning wreckage and shattered ships. Debris drifted like silent tombstones, marking the cost of war. The UED of fleet had suffered, but Earth's warriors were not defeated. Inside the bridge of the UEDF Warhammer, Admiral Kane stood firm, his gaze locked on the massive HFY dreadnought that had erased an entire cruiser with a single blast. The enemy ship was unlike anything they had encountered before, not just technology, but something unnatural. "Status report," Kane barked. "Shields at 60%. His tactical officer responded. "Weapon systems still operational, but if that thing fires again..." Kane cut him off. "It won't." His officers turned to him, waiting. He exhaled, voice steady. "We're taking it down. We don't have a choice." The fleet adjusted, preparing for a full-force assault on the Harbinger-class dreadnought. But then, something unexpected happened. The massive HFY ship began to change. Its organic plating shifted, pulsating like a living thing. The eerie glow running along its hull intensified, and for the first time, it moved, not like a ship, but like a predator. It was alive. And it was evolving. Raylan Carter gritted his teeth, hands gripping the controls of his fighter as he swerved between debris. "Tell me someone else is seeing this." "Confirmed," Hall replied. His voice was tense. "That thing's morphing." Raylan's sensors flickered, struggling to keep up with the energy spikes coming from the dreadnought. The ship was adapting. "It's learning from us," Raylan realized. "It's not just a warship. It's a weaponized organism." The implications hit hard. Every attack, every strategy they used. The ship was adjusting, countering, improving. And if they didn't find a way to stop it now, they never would. On the Tyrak bridge, Supreme Commander Vorthis watched with satisfaction. His mandibles clicked in amusement as the Harbinger prepared to fire again. "Pathetic," he muttered. "They fight, but they do not understand." One of his officers turned to him. "The Harbinger is approaching full charge, Supreme Commander. We can wipe them out in one final strike." Vorthis bared his fangs in approval. "Then let us end them." But before the Harbinger could unleash its devastating weapon, a new energy reading spiked across the battlefield. Vorthis' eyes narrowed. "What is that?" The officer hesitated, checking the scanners again. And then, with a mix of disbelief and horror, he answered, "Sir, it's coming from the humans." Admiral Kane stood at the center of the Warhammer's bridge, watching the tactical display. A single red pulse was now blinking on the screen, a signal from the fleet's most classified project. "Is the weapon ready?" Kane asked. The chief engineer nodded grimly. "It wasn't meant for this, sir. We've never tested it in battle." "Then we test it now," Kane said. There was no hesitation. "All ships, clear a path," Kane commanded. "Project Ragnarok is going live." Across the fleet, one single vessel detached from formation. It was unlike the others. Not a battleship, not a destroyer, but something new. A prototype. A weapon designed for one purpose: to end wars before they began. The UED of Ragnarok moved toward the HFY dreadnought, its hull humming with untapped power. Inside, its eye-controlled systems calculated a single terrifying equation: annihilation or extinction. And then, it fired. A single pulse of energy erupted from the Ragnarok, slamming into the Harbinger. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the massive HFY dreadnought screamed. The sound was unnatural, vibrating through space as its organic plating began to burn, twist, rupture. The energy beam didn't just damage the ship, it rewrote its very structure. The Harbinger thrashed, trying to resist, but the weapon was designed to do more than destroy. It was built to erase threats at a molecular level. Raylan watched in awe as the enemy's most powerful warship was unmade before his eyes. Hall's voice cracked over the comms. "Holy, did we just kill a ship or a god?" Raylan exhaled. "Either way, it's dead." On the HFY bridge, silence reigned. Vorth's eyes were wide. His strongest weapon, his ultimate ship, was gone. And for the first time in HFY history, fear crept into their leader's voice. "Retreat," he whispered. The HFY fleet hesitated. They had never received such an order before. "I said retaliate," Vorthis roared. The fleet turned, fleeing the battlefield in a chaotic scramble. The once mighty armada of the HFY Empire ran. Back on the Warhammer, the bridge erupted into cheers. But Admiral Kane didn't celebrate. His gaze remained fixed on the battlefield, on the ashes of war. "We won," an officer said breathlessly. Kane exhaled. For now, because deep in his gut, he knew the truth. That HFY had never run before, but now that they had seen Earth's true power, now that they had tasted defeat, they would be back. And next time, they wouldn't come for battle. They'd come for revenge. The silence after the battle was unsettling. Wreckage drifted through space like scattered bones, remnants of a war that had nearly destroyed them all. But victory had come at a cost, one that Admiral Kane understood far too well. He stood at the bridge of the UED of Warhammer, staring at the scorched remains of the battlefield. The HFY had retreated, their once mighty fleet shattered, their monstrous dreadnought reduced to nothing but cosmic dust. But something felt wrong. "Status report," Kane ordered. "Minimal damage across the fleet," Commander Rourke responded. "We lost 5 capital ships, but our defenses held. The Ragnarok is intact, though its energy reserves are nearly depleted. We won." "Sir." Kane didn't look convinced. "Then why does it feel like we just walked into their trap?" Rourke hesitated. "Sir." Kane turned to face him, his jaw tight. "The HFY don't retreat. Not like that. They had an entire fleet left, but the moment we used the Ragnarok, they ran like frightened animals." He pointed at the main display, where the wreckage of the Harbinger-class dreadnought still flickered on the screen. "They lost their strongest warship, yes. But what if?" Kane's voice trailed off. Rourke frowned. "You think they let us win?" Kane didn't answer. Because deep in his gut, he knew the truth. This war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Deep within HFY territory, Supreme Commander Vorthis stood in his dimly lit war chamber, watching the holographic replay of the battle. His claws tapped against the metal surface, his eyes fixed on the moment when the Harbinger-class dreadnought was erased from existence. Behind him, a figure emerged from the shadows. A HFY scientist, hunched and calculating. "My lord," the scientist hissed, "the data has been analyzed. The human weapon, the Ragnarok, it is unlike anything we have ever encountered." Vorthis didn't turn. "And?" The scientist hesitated before responding. "It is unstable. A prototype. It drained all its energy in one blast. If the humans had to fire again, they would have failed." Vorthis finished for him, his mandibles curling into a twisted grin. The scientist nodded. "Yes, and their fleet is weak. Their ships are durable, but they lack the regenerative capabilities of our own. Their defenses are predictable. They won the battle, Supreme Commander, but they cannot win the war." Vorthis finally turned to face the scientist. His golden eyes burned with something dark. "Good," he rumbled. He stepped toward the war map, where a holographic projection of Earth hovered above the surface. "Then it is time," Vorthis declared. He raised his clawed hand, pressing a sequence of commands into the control panel. The holographic map shifted, revealing something hidden in the depths of HFY space. Something massive. A fleet. No, the fleet. Hundreds of warships, thousands of fighters, battlecruisers larger than any human vessel ever recorded. And in the center of them all, a ship unlike any other. The Vortex Prime. The flagship of the HFY Emperor. Vorthis' eyes gleamed with malice. The humans thought they'd fought our strongest force today. But that... He let out a chilling laugh. That was just a test. He turned back to the scientist. "Activate the beacon. Summon the Emperor's fleet." The scientist hesitated. "My lord, are we certain? If we deploy the full might of the HFY Empire, there will be no turning back." Vorthis' voice was cold. There was never any turning back. They dared to challenge us. They dared to kill our Harbinger. His claws clenched into a fist. "Now we burn their world to the ground." Aboard the UEDF Warhammer. "Admiral, we're picking up a signal," the communications officer reported. "Unknown source, but it's broadcasting on a high-frequency military channel." Kane turned sharply. "Put it on screen." The main display flickered, then stabilized. A single image filled the screen. A HFY war emblem. And beneath it, one chilling message. "The Emperor is coming." The bridge fell into stunned silence. Commander Rourke exhaled. "Sir, what do we do?" Kane didn't hesitate. His voice was like steel. "We prepare." He turned to his officers. "Send out a priority distress call to all human colonies. Get me the council, the defense ministers, every fleet commander we have left. The HFY are coming back, and this time, they're bringing everything they have." His gaze darkened. "We survived today, but if we're not ready for what's next..." He let the silence speak for him, because everyone on that bridge knew the truth. If the humans lost the next battle, it wouldn't just be their fleet that was destroyed. It would be Earth.